Why, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. My name is Mr. Dogboat333 and welcome back to Hearts of Iron 4, New Order, Silicon Dreams, as Guangdong. In the last video, we made a pretty big splash with our new air conditioning units from Matsushita. They sold out pretty well, and I believe we actually got some extra seats out of it. Yep, 22. Very nice to see. Looks like we took them from Yasuda and Suzuki. I believe next we're gonna check out the ordinances now. It's gonna be neat to see. We'll be able to get some help from two factions, it looks like. Interesting. Let's propose a revised labor standards ordinance. Suzuki has surveyed both the economic and security situation of Guangdong, and what he has found does not bode well for the future of our muddled nation. The chief executive found that preserving Japan's long-term rule over Guangdong will necessitate some form of compromise between the corporations and the people, which Suzuki has identified as a growing threat of an ethnic time bomb, which is made worse by the day as companies relentlessly pursue quick profits above all else. Both the people and the firms Guangdong will need placating before this conflict is brought before the fore. So the chief executive has determined that the backing of future dissent must promptly be drained by revising current labor standards of a nation. This move will no doubt be unpopular for businessmen who rely on cheap labor. Guangdong's current lax regulations allow, but the change is needed now before the rising tide of dissent washes all of Suzuki's work away. He has a point. We're very close to getting the jungle figured out. Lamhai Shion took one more glance at the freshly torn envelope in his hand, with what little cash left within, and handwritten on it was the all-too-familiar line of addresses, his one remaining anchor of distant patches of soil he called home. He could only hope that the amount he sent was enough for them to get by. The mail blackout since 3 weeks ago was growing more worrisome by the day. Pushing such concerns out of his thoughts, he lifted his head and stepped out of the threshold of the Cha Chan Ting. Greeting him, as he strode into the cramped dining hall, were the all-too-familiar mixtures of odors. The all-too-familiar yells and shatters in perfect Cantonese. The all-too-familiar faces of his colleagues. Their features all too wrinkled to give away one bit of youthfulness. As Lam returned to their exhausted greetings, the desperate visage of that young countryman and his aging mother flashed back to him. How he wished he could give the family his wishes, but then he'd be lying to himself, for he knew what awaited those indigenous folks, as higher-ups called them. It could only be factory after factory, as far as the eye could see, eager to squish them into the cogs of industrial machine and nothing else. It was only his meager Japanese skills that rescued him from this disaster of a business venture back in Hong Kong. After all, quite frankly, anyone without the fortune to possess such resources would be doomed to the bottom of the pyramid for lesser lives. As Lam gobbled away at his plate of egg and meat choing fang, something right outside the glass panes caught his eye. A slender feminine figure clad in pale blue kimono, peeking inside with almost curious wonder. The next moment she was gone, swept away by another towering, sharply dressed figure. Before Lam could spare it much thought, he felt a tug at his shoulder. But another accident, another body pull off the nets. So Officer Hayashi shrugged, abandoned his plate, and hurried out into the afternoon lights. Perhaps that was just another Japanese tourist. An all too familiar sight. What do I want to do? We'll do industry management, as well as consumer goods production efficiency. There we go. These guys are going to attack into us. There we go. We got 4 out of 5 finished now. That is incredible. Honestly, what I need at this point is I need them to push into cities. Yoshiko, come on, stop staring. Baron Yasukawa's voice carried clearly from 10 paces away at the clouded Koshu Street, where Yasukawa Yoshiko, now dressed in a pale blue kimono, peered into a darkened Cha Ching Ting. Just looking, father. Yoshiko walked briskly back to her father's side, the kimono folds, holding her to her short, rapid strides, kicking up dust from the streets. It's not odd to want to see how people live their lives outside of Japan, isn't it? You shouldn't be close to the Chinese. There's no reason to be. Baron Yashikawa admonished Yoshiko. They do their job, we do ours. It's how things work. Yes, father. Yoshiko demurred for a second before she looked back at the receding eatery. The people inside looked tired, father, but they were lively. A dozen tables found an empty seat, all speaking over each other. Nothing like home. Baron Yashikawa frowned and a flash of irritation on his face. You don't know the Chinese at all. Don't pretend that you do. Well then, what about our valet? He spoke Japanese and seemed perfectly nice. What are they called? Jujin? The people here can't be all bad. They're none of your concern, Yoshiko. We're going back to Japan tomorrow, Baron Yasukawa declared while pulling Yoshiko's hand. You don't have to worry about the world like you did in college. You're a daughter of the Yasukawa family. You'll probably never come back here again once you're married. Yoshiko chose to be silent, her mind elsewhere. Proposed revised standard labor ordinances. Let's see. So, the effect would be to heighten scrutiny upon factors regarding occupational safety. Passing the revised labor standards ordinance, it's going to increase the minimum wage policy effectiveness, increase the workday effectiveness, improve Chinese support. Let's go ahead and invest LegCo member finances, increase the corruption, because it is kind of high. We could use without that. We're going to hold court with the heir. As heir to the prestigious electronics manufacturer, Matsushita Electric, Matsushita Mashaharu's voice carries great weight inside the Legislative Council and the wider Japanese community. The position has helped develop a persistent vigilance against movements that may negatively impact what will soon be his company. Therefore, Suzuki's reforms will, unfortunately, not be welcomed by Matsushita. The position of an heir is highly precarious, no matter how hard Matsushita tries to cement the position. He can always use some assistance, and who better to help than the chief executive himself? Yasuda may help raise concerns over the future of their established relationship with Suzuki, though his qualms will have to be accepted if the support of the heir is to be gained. Today in the Legislative Council, Chief Executive Suzuki Taiichi introduced a bill without precedent, short history of the state of Guangdong, or perhaps an entire CPS. The proposed revised labor standards ordinance was kept just right enough to give workers a taste of tolerable treatment, keeping them docile at reasonable cost. Within the proposal were guarantees of maximum workdays and mandated days off, as well as guidelines for increased scrutiny on Guangdong's firms about seeing to their enforcement. The Legislative Council's reactions were varied, but relatively peaceful compared to some of the more vigorous, as it were, sessions, which tend to be more reminiscent of an old Polish parliament than anything. Morita Aiko of Sony was cautiously receptive, stating that there was a necessary first step on building a more humane and therefore more profitable Guangdong. Matsushita Matsushita was more reticent, politely voicing his reservations and the stereotypical concerns of, where will we get the money, and what destabilizing effects can this have? Matsuzawa Tedkuki of Yasuda merely nodded along to anything Suzuki said, while Ubuka Masari of Fujitsu at once mocked Suzuki for proposing it, and Morita for supporting it, denouncing the idea's nonsense and denying that there was even a need to resort to an ordinance in the first place. All told, the matter was peaceful. There were disagreements, but nothing theatrical took place. Oddly good behavior for a lot of corporate vultures, Suzuki thought. Well, let's not say anything yet. It's still early on. I have an idea. It's a peculiar idea, admittedly. But maybe the only way we can max out things on this rate. I'll wait for a second, I think. Some time after their forced resettlement, the Lee family was immersed full force in the harsh life of the average Koshu worker. Lee Chun was no exception. Within weeks of moving to the city, he was working back-breaking hours in a Japanese-owned factory. Mistakes were immediately docked from his pay, which was disastrous given that his pay was barely enough for rent as it is. This fail if you don't get 5 out of 5 will just not be as good. I'm not sure. I'm sure if we get 4 out of 5 it'll be okay, but still. Chun was desperate. He wanted to make some more money and be recognized. He saw an improvement that could be made in a process and pointed out to his Zujin foreman, a man who called himself Saga. The man nodded appreciatively and said his thanks. At that, Chun's heart rose hopefully. Maybe this would earn him some more pay, enough to feed his family. Maybe might even be enough to send Y and Hei to school. In retrospect, Chun would say, he should have realized it wasn't to be. The next day, Chun heard and saw his Zujin supervisor getting a pat on his back from Japanese foreman, and the process that Chun had suggested was implemented across the factory. Chun realized that the Zujin bastard had taken credit for himself. His world became gray and his dejection darkened. He didn't even bother focusing for the rest of the day. Mistakes matter not, there was no hope anyway. Alas, that is how it works. Okay, so. Some might consider this to be slight treason. But, what do they know? Some of you might be picking up what I'm suggesting anyway, right now. The gaming Valensman console comes out, and you know it. Tag GNG. This might be slightly treasonous to the Empire, but I wanted to test this out a little bit. Well, first we need to be able to move into here, which the AI is not fully appreciating what they could do. Matsushita Masahiro, the president and representative director of Matsushita Electrical Corporation, had a supercilious smile resting on his lips as he sat opposite Suzuki. Chief Executive, I'm assuming that I've been called here to discuss the matter of the Labor Act. Well, I've decided to request the support of Matsushita. Our history's not always been the most smooth after all. Why not request support of Yasuda? They've always been your biggest allies on council, if I'm not mistaken. Suzuki took a few seconds to consider his response, even as Matsushita's calm, calculating demeanor unsettled him. Decided it's a wider decision to employ the help of your corporation rather than try and convince immovable hardliners like Ibuka or in Fujitsu or over-lenient liberals like Morita and Sony. Matsushita seemingly contemplated his choices, likely analyzing every word that came out of Suzuki's mouth. I believe an agreement can certainly be reached, but at a price, of course. But like your backing in future endeavors of the council, with equal access equal or greater than given to Yasuda. Your act hurts our profit and growth forecasts. So these requests are necessary. I'm sure you can understand. A look of relief appeared on Suzuki's face. Of course, I'm glad we could come to an agreement. As Matsushita walked out of his office, Suzuki's mind remained fixated on his uncanny, unbreaking smile. He could not shake the feeling that, if he left his back unguarded, he might find a dagger protruding from it without little warning. And now we wait. Consider the alliances and stances of the executives' opinions on labor rights when gathering support. I think Sony would be more interesting than Matsushita, right? I don't think we're supposed to ally with Yasuda here. So I'm gonna save here. I mean, Fujitsu seems certainly out of question. I agree. Yasuda as well, I think. Let's meet with Maverick then. Morita Akio, as president of Sony, has done what so few Japanese businessmen have even been willing to even consider, namely making Guangdong the home of their companies. His confidence in our nation is certainly appreciated. However, Morita holds substantial grudges against other members of the establishment of the Legislative Council, especially Ibuka Masaru, who forced exile upon him all those years ago. Morita's simmering anger for those people who Suzuki will need to keep on side will somewhat take away from the amount the chief executive can openly support him. Nevertheless, Morita is one of the only outspoken supporters of reform inside the council. Surely you will see merit in Suzuki's proposal. My idea's kind of, my idea hasn't quite worked out. Hold on. Okay, I'll just have to make it blatantly obvious that there's a hole. Hopefully that'll awaken the AI to potential. No, actually I'll hold up. Meet with the Maverick. And then we can do a red envelope campaign. While we have extended significant political capital in inquiring what votes need to pass the revised labor standards ordinances, there are so many who remain opposed to our initiative. Shore up our position and ensure that nothing goes awry when our bill comes up in the council. Some underhanded methods might be needed. An expensive gift, a new car, and all expenses paid vacation to Okinawa. It's amazing how much more pliable people become once a little persuasion has been done. This initiative, however, will not be cheap. And if we have failed to gather the necessary votes beforehand, the drain on treasure will be substantial. Well, we need only 2 more. I beg your pardon. Suzuki murmured, almost instinctively, knowing perfectly well it was coming his way. Another manifestation of Morita Aiko's affinity for radicalism that had made itself painstakingly known during all these past months. Promise me you will enforce worker protection regulations on any and all firms within the border. No exceptions. Then we'll talk. Before him, the head of Sony Corporation sat squarely on his familiar sofa, eyes fixed intently on the chief executive, limbs and posture perfectly upright. Quite the character as ever, Suzuki pondered. An obstinate mule who just happened to have his mind in the right place. Most certainly. You do realize universal worker protection is the very crux of your LSO, yes? Compliance is non-negotiable, even if I were to personally think otherwise. I'm not saying you would be the one to tear it up. But, you know who would? Ibuka Masaru, the oh-so-mighty know-it-all that just wouldn't shut up about his glassy new order. Should his apologetic cheap labor exploitation run unchecked, I'm sure he'll end up with substantially lower production costs than the rest of us. This is how I turn the LSO little more than a blank piece of paper in terms of fairness and practicality, and watering it down would play right into his hands. With this, Morita leaned forward, the gaze from his bespectacled eyes glowing ever more fear. So please, for the sake of everyone, don't let that weasel lay his hands on the deal. Ever. With sudden outbursts of venom, and his words made Suzuki flinch. The man wouldn't stop at Sony. He'll gladly screw over the rest of us for so long as he's alive. Sure thing. Doesn't, you can help teleport them. True. You should have seen these complaints coming. A sigh escaped Kan Si-hung's mouth, barely audible among the clankering within the cafeteria. You know, parents lose their mind when they hear the words Japanese and imperialism next to each other. Not giving a fuck about dumbasses is the whole point of academia. Suzuka Hayako threw his chopstick aside. The home islands are a lost cause in that regard, and that's why I'm here down south in the first place. You're not standing for those people all of a sudden, are you? Do I look like I have much of a choice? Apparently he went on in class about how Zujin was an artificial construct, but guess what? There's one sitting in front of you right now. I knew what I signed up for back in 56. I knew that for all the opportunities and incentives the newborn Lego dangled in front of us, only the Japanese language proficiently mattered in the end. That you speak in the same tongue as your Pan-Asian brothers and acquiesce in the same new order as they do just to get a better job than blue collar. Could have done something back then. Protested, stood your ground, anything! And applying for Zujin just happened to be that something, didn't it? We live in a reality, Hayako, where piety to ethnic labels can only get a Chinese person like me so far. And I'm certain many others thought the same too. Otherwise, Zujin as a concept would have never lived on. I wouldn't be able to sit here with at least with consolation knowing that nobody like us exists on the other corner of the planet. So no, I can't just lash out like some raging, entitled maniac at what little I've been given. He gazed at his companion's befuddled eyes. That is a Japanese man's luxury. You guys want to attack Kuala Lumpur? Just very obsessed with this little bit of land, aren't they? Will that make them surrender if they took it, though? No, they have to be pushed all the way down to here, I think. And if they surrender, it doesn't matter, as long as we get our tests done. Suzuki's apprehensively paced around his expansive office during an unusually silent evening, looking at a cigarette clinging to his mouth. He vigorously attempted to recall all his events that had led up to this moment over the past few months. His dealings with the tycoons or his attempts to shore public support. The Legislative Council will undoubtedly vote upon the status of the RSL very soon, vote upon the fate of his magnum opus and the assets it may affect. He's certainly very tired, but he will contribute anything to ensure that the Labor Act passes. Suzuki, in his back and forth, opens an unassuming drawer in his desk. The drawer contains several red envelopes, a traditional East Asian custom of exchanging money as gifts. Suzuki ponders over the idea of possibly persuading certain figures with these red envelopes. Filled, of course. Red envelopes would certainly be a boon to his efforts. Gaining last-minute support is never a bad thing. Suzuki continued to contemplate if he should utilize these envelopes, as it could damage his image if news of it ever got out. As the amount given out would be costly, despite his declarations, he would soon make the decision definitive. No matter what it would take, he would get the LSO passed. Frugality is unnecessary. Also considerable corruption, huh? Well, we're coming to the end of this. Let's call the vote. Weeks of backroom meetings, politicking, and vote gathering has come to this. Voting on the revised labor standards ordinance has finally begun in the Legislative Council. With it, we shall help endure Guangdong's future stability and prosperity, no matter the grumbling of agitators or stubborn executives. The die's been cast, and we've ensured that the game has been rigged from the start. We got it? There we go, 55 votes. Not bad at all. Jerusalem Conference. And for TNO throws a massive curveball, but Troy's already playing as usual. True. going to slow down the speed a little bit. Let go voting. It was a sunny day in Legislative Council, and Chief Executive Suzuki colored himself pleased. His proposal just right enough to give workers a taste of tolerable treatment, keeping them docile at a reasonable cost, had passed. Granted, the Legislative Council was divided on the matter, but then it always was. At least they were not squabbling too violently. Tajiki and Yasuda, as always, were willing sycophants to Suzuki's rule, were politely applauding, and Suzuki could tell that some of them even meant it. Akino's were former Sony delegates, on the other hand, were in jubilation, celebrating what they called important and long overdue process, or, less prosaically, a big fucking deal. Their man Matsushita and his lot were much more calmer, offering superficial congratulations that Suzuki could tell none of them meant sincerely. Three of Ibuka's men that did not file out in silence were much the same. Ibuka not stayed behind to offer any insight into his thinking. Suzuki's not entirely pleased, though. After all, he had to compromise on his own sense of business integrity. That is, bend over by using bribes to get the bill passed. But at the very least, he had succeeded. That was worth more than any betrayed principles. Cheers, he thought. We're getting pretty close to, I think, what we were trying, our minimum. I forget what exactly it was we needed to go for, but we called the vote. And we have an invitation to Xinjiang. An invitation to Manchukuo's Chinese Economic Conference has recently been delivered to our government. In a feat of typical Manchurian perfidy, it arrived months late and sent our diplomatic team scrambling. The rats in Xinjiang have even dared to put the blame on us for being late to put in an RSVP. Despite their attempts to hinder us, we will not be made fools of. A delegation will be selected and dispatched with all due haste and will show the world Guangdong's finest. Of course, this leaves a matter of who we are going to be accompanying to the conference wide open. We'll have to decide that quickly. The cries of Chun's younger sister jolted him awake, the piercing pitch only somewhat mulled by the dull pain that squeezed his spine. Stearns was by no means new to the Lee family, Chun especially, who endured much worse than a split ear and a bad back during a short day in the city. Chun shook off the confusion. Not a man could be spared to dwell on the complexity of his life's new arrangement. It was time to trudge to work, and he waved a tired goodbye to his mother, numb to the cries and the aching. Step after step, his hands buried deep in his pockets, and already become a mindless chore to him. His bleak expectations were dispelled by his short lunch break. Words of action by the government had spread. Some mentioned higher wages, others prophesied protection from abuse, but these details mattered little to Chun. Merely the fact that the government was willing to consider any form of improvements was enough to raise his spirits as he returned to the factory floor. His optimism soon vanished again as he heard the owner's distant voice announced amidst open laughter. There's no way those fools can enforce this. I'd pay more attention to a dog than the damn bill. Later that night, Chun heaved himself dejectedly through the door of his family's apartment, only for he to nearly knock him over at the door, exclaiming that their father had the most money in his hands since they came to Koshu. His father had an announcement to the whole family, one that gave Chun some welcome relief after the trials of the day. I'll order us all pork for tomorrow. Well, that's nice, at least. Suzuki's desk is in its usual condition, unorganized and crowded with paperwork. The chief executive continues to attend to his matters. Everyday mundane pen pushing, this time in a document on the management of coal assets in Guangdong. As he continues to progress through the documents, his secretary enters the offices, placing yet another sheet of paper upon the pre-existing piles. Suzuki merely glances at it before asking the secretary what it's about. Tell me what this one's about. Make it quick. Well, sir, it seems to be a letter from the Empire of Manchuria, an invitation of some sorts. This made Suzuki appear visibly intrigued, dropping the pen and picking up the letter. Why are the Manchurians inviting us to anything? Let them be with their supercilious attitudes and supposed grandeur. We were better off here anyway. Though they would be fine clients. He tore open the envelope, bearing the seal of Manchukuo, revealing an invitation to Xinjiang for an economic conference of China. Suzuki saw it like a golden opportunity to create connections, but it likely isn't going to happen anytime soon. The details could be settled later. He passed it back to his secretary, telling him to set aside for some time in the future, and turn to the original task. Excuse me, Mr. Suzuki. Are you aware the date for the RSVP was around a month ago? Suzuki immediately put his work on hold and began frankly writing down possible candidates to accompany him to Sing King. Whoever it would be part of what represented Suzuki in the state of Guangdong as a whole to much of the Crow Prosperity Spear. We could curry favors with Matsushita, methinks. Well, let's go ahead and get some anti-air going. And with that, Matsushita's making a nice little bonus. Manchuria cringe. True. Very true. Well, I'll continue a little bit longer. Yeah. Let's parlay with some Manchurian host. The Empire Manchuria are questionably our foremost rivals in the CPS, competing with our products and our merchants for market share and influence with our industrial-minded slave labor. They look down on us at every turn, the representatives of our emperor, thumbing their nose down at our chief executive. But we ought to pay a visit to the host of this conference a show of Pan-Asian unity, no matter our mutual animosity. And who knows, maybe these arrogant Manchus might just let something valuable slip. Okay. Oh. It's pretty wild that we're at part 8 already. It's not even 63 yet. I think it's part 6. We're at part 6. Hope it's a spear link front. I hope so too. I think this is just part 6. Well, I think this might be part 7. Trying to coax them into attacking us, but they're not doing anything. The marble hall was adorned in golden statuary and vermilion carpeting, illuminating by electric chandeliers nestled gently in recesses on the cabinet ceiling. The finest delicacies, Chinese ducks or Japanese sea urchins, that seemed good to offer were served on silver platters by the silent legion of Emperor Puyi's household staff. Dinings of hundreds milled around, the morning gowns and evening dresses, summoned from across the corners of China and the Spear to be present Manchukuo, the second eldest brother of Spear. It was all a little bit over the top, Suzuki thought. It was clear that the organizers of the Pan-Asian Chinese Economic Conference spared no expense. Even the marble was scuffled in places, and the electrolytes faded in comparison to the neon of Koshu. The Manchurians knew how to make a strong first impression. They, not the regime in Nanjing, were the light and glory of China, for now and forever. And the Nanjing delegation, having arrived in their best morning suits and court attire, with what scant decorations Japanese allowed them on their chests, were being given short strife, and Suzuki and Guangdong's delegation were being ignored entirely. Having scrambled onto a plane with just enough time to pack a set of clothes, Suzuki looked as he would on any other day in Koshu, donning a tailored, expertly pressed brown suit with a tasteful pocket chief. He might well have appeared as if he was begging on his Sing's streets. Let's go talk to the guests. Well, these guys are retreating, actually. Maybe. Happy New Year! Go ahead and work towards specialist weapons, I guess. In the Gilded Office aside from the convention, adorned with decor and symbols, the Empire Manchuria sits Manchukuo's economic minister and chief executive Suzuki. Their eyes are locked onto each other, resentful full of tension emanating between the two men. The strained silence is broken by the minister. Now, Mr. Suzuki, how have you been enjoying the amenities of the Empire? There's no doubt you must be awed by the industrial prowess of Spears' crown jewel. Suzuki does not reply. I've heard about the burgeoning success of the Guangdong electronics industry. It might prove a problem for us later on, but for now it's merely a trifle, though we'll have to see. Suzuki was utterly baffled at such an outlandishly impolite tone and choice of words. Problem? Trifle? Is that what he compares the state of Guangdong and its industry to? Suzuki exited the office after a couple minutes, having barely said but a handful of words, clearly fuming about the outrageously discourteous attitude of the minister. A man like that representing an entire nation's economy was unthinkable to him. Does leave glad with one thing, though. Guangdong, as far as he knows, was considered a threat to the Manchurians. And their mention of the electronics industry made Suzuki a lot more heartened with his nation. Not yet, but soon. So now the Janks are starting to go wild a little bit. Let's approach the Chinese. While our northern neighbors have never been particularly satisfied with the loss of Guangdong, we do need to play nice with Chinese. A phone call to Nanjing and a few hollow promises should be enough to get us to parley with them. And with a population of several hundred million and some rather ambitious modernization plans, China could be quite a bountiful market in the near future. And it wouldn't do to let an opportunity like this go miss. Hello, my friend, how are you? Welcome. I think that's Privyet, right? Privyet's hello. I know a little bit of... I think I know a little bit of Russian, at least. Not partitioned. The opulent nature of the Manchukuo Accord has not been kept a secret to anyone. Economic check soon, shoot. Okay, we got the, we have the GDP. The nature of Manchukuo Accord has not been kept a secret to anyone attending the convention, especially not Suzuki and his humble entourage, but the focus of Suzuki during the conference was not appearance, but the attendees. Suzuki's attention first turned towards the Chinese delegation, a colossal potential investment market, though it may not be too keen, especially regarding Guangdong's and China's tumultuous and uneasy past. He never really did talk to the men in Nanjing much, no more than just a couple meager phone calls, despite the fact that China was right next door. As Suzuki approached the delegation, a face seemed instantly familiar. Song Zizhuang, China's consul general to Guangdong. Song had been born in what used to be the province of Guangdong and was undoubtedly still quite peeved about its departure. Nonetheless, he would be the man to approach for any communications. Song spotted Suzuki approaching and immediately greeted him. Hello, Mr. Suzuki. I see you've made it. Well, Song, it always pleases me to see you. Just being informed that Guangdong is always welcome to investments, for the benefits of all Asia. With that sentence, a feeling of unease emanated from Song, and he took a second before responding. Of course. I'm sure we'll get to it at some point. After all, it is our duty to support our populace. Suzuki felt a hint of animosity come from reply. Did he mean ours and us, or as in them? Suzuki wrapped up the short conversation with a reassurance that they could come to him at any time, the R still lingering in his mind. A thinly veiled insult. Next, we'll consult with Japanese, the masters of Asia, and of us. While we are unquestionably tightly bound to our masters in Tokyo, we have few opportunities to meet with the Empire face to face. This is a golden opportunity that cannot be squandered. We shall meet with our Japanese representatives and see what our masters wish of us. In exchange, we shall acquire the backing of the Empire of the Rising Sun, and support for us and Guangdong's Japanese expatriates will be unquestionably valuable. Zhang looked at the pagoda of loyal spirits and could tell that it was not built to look impressive. The stone monument towered not only his young, but also both sides of Port Shori. With the sun behind it, the 80-meter tower blanketed the surrounding area in shadow. The previous night's rain caught the morning sun, granting the pagoda concrete a soft sheen. The tower stood above much of the city from atop its mountain peak and massive stone foundation. In all aspects, it truly represented Japan's rule over Hong Kong. Zheng struggled to remember the details of its past beyond the basics. He knew it had been constructed during the war, although it only was probably finished several years after peace with America had been achieved. There was also apparently some ancient Japanese blade buried beneath the massive tower, an axe signifying Japan's future victories in battle. And yet, despite all the grandeur and all the aspirations, pagoda was little more than a big hunk of concrete. When Japanese had built it, it stood atop Hong Kong's skyline alone and unchallenged. Now skyscrapers dotted the city's skyline, and from a distance, the pagoda was either hardly visible or blended in amongst the many geometric towers. The pagoda couldn't even claim to be unique, with dozens of similar monuments dotting battered China's coast. Each monument was yet another drop from a blood-soaked katana falling upon the canvas of time, each drop destined to merely fade away with passing years. The author of the pagoda, momentarily inspired in Zhang, had snuffed out, and replaced instead by questions. Foremost among them were two. What made the monument special? And what made Guangdong special? So, the front lines are falling apart, so I might have gone a little bit too far in my efforts here. Ooh. We'll build some infrastructure, actually. I don't know if infrastructure will do anything, but I'll do it just in case. Suki sat alone in the quiet chamber, its atmosphere calm and silent against the thundering crowds of investors and delegates in the palatial halls. We might have to worry about that next time. Stark contrast to the rest of the convention, pardon me. He checked on his watch once again, but taking apparent in silence. He wondered if his watch was broken, but it was unlikely, even 20 minutes after the scheduled time. A faint creak on the door was heard, heralding the arrival of several men in professionally tailored suits, of much superior quality than Suzuki's own. The Japanese delegation. I apologize for our tardiness. We had more important business to attend to. Suzuki begrudgingly nodded and continued down his planned proposal to mention the usual. Men seemed indifferent to his proposals, but the conversation proceeded along smoothly. And thus, it would be greatly appreciated if extra investments into Guangdong were solicited. At this, the delegation began to shift, prompting one of the men in the group to speak. Chief Executive Suzuki, we would love to provide additional investment, but that must come some other time. We will attempt to provide what we can for now, but the current focus is upon Manchukuo. It's the reason why we're here, after all. The meeting progressed another few minutes before the delegation decided it was reasonable to leave. Suzuki remained in the room and sighed, feeling utterly dissatisfied. Could have gone worse. Could have gone worse. Could have gone better. But for now, all we can really worry about is the next day. And by that I mean the next part. I gotta end it here. This is going on for a fair bit. This video is probably huge. I hope you guys enjoy, but I got stuff I gotta do. It's supposed to be snowing soon, so I gotta make sure I'm ready and heading down to school for the week so I don't get snowed in. So yeah, that's it for now, my friends. Thanks for watching as always. Like this video, leave a like. If not, feel free to dislike. If you have any comments, feedback, concern, leave a comment section below. I real comments get appreciated if you not after me. If you want to keep up to date with these uploads, hit the sub button, maybe even the notification bell. Check my various links down in the description box below. And, yeah, that's it for now, my friends. Thank you for always watching. My name is Mr. Yaga with 333, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.